horses.
There was department stores, Atlases, and Goldbergs.
That's what memories are made of, you know, just everyday events in your life back then.
The ladies would come to the soda fountain, and the gentlemen would go to the pool hall.
Lights, but we got to turn the street lights off in the alleys and stuff.
I don't remember the Great Depression. I remember the hard times.
I wish that some of the young people of today could be transported back and spend a week growing up like I did.
I had a great childhood. It was filled with lots of fun and promise.
What did you do for fun?
Well, like you kids today, we run and wrestled and played ball.
Oh, let's see. We played, what did we play?
I don't know whether you play anything like that now or not. Farmer in the Dale.
Bicycles and skated and
Drop the handkerchief.
like jumping rope, hopscotch, playing house,
Needles
and
on.
Go Sheepy Go,
Kings something or other.
Fox and the Geese.
Red Rover, and some of those kind of games.
Red Rover, send somebody over, whoever that person was, and
kick the can for one thing.
And we played tin can copper, and whatever that is.
And we had some circle games, Ring Around the Rosie, a good bit of circle games, yeah.
When I was a kid, they had, you did different things at different times of the year. For instance, there was a baseball season. We had a season we hunted frogs. Then we had a season when we played marbles.
It wasn't like the kids play ball today because we didn't have any T-shirts with your name on it, and nobody's mother got involved, and they weren't all divided up into ages. You know, just all the kids played. And if you were little, you were way out in the outfield, and when you got older, you moved in a little. But you learned to get along.
Kick the can. Hide and seek.
Yeah, kick the can. Kids don't do that anymore.
Yeah, kick the can. But we used to play a game called Old Maid. And anyhow, we'd have a post or a can sitting down the road, and then somebody would be the old maid. Well, he'd get in the back, and then they'd come up there and he'd say, well, hi there, do you have any pies today? And every person had a different name, was a different kind of pie. And he says, do you have any pies today? He said, oh yeah, we got all kinds of pies. Well, do you have any lemon pie? Well, if you was a lemon pie, you had to take off running, you know, run down around that can, and the witch would chase you. And if she hit you on the back, then use the witch. We used to play a game like that.
See, they used to play that in number 6, but only the boys was allowed to do that. They didn't allow girls.
I don't even remember girls playing when they was all boys when I don't even remember girls. What I they must have stayed home, played dolls or something. I don't know what they did.
Hide and go seek, Mother May I, games that we done physically.
We played jump rope a lot. Double Dutch was always fun with the 2 jump ropes, like that.
We had to make do with what we could find. We played house, the girls, and the boys played kickball or marbles a lot.
The boys that have their knuckles all dirty, couldn't get them clean.
And my brother always beat me and always won my marbles.
And I was never allowed to have a bicycle. I don't mean I was deprived, but I was really sheltered, because I think Mother thought that I was going to be the only kid she ever had. So they were very careful with me. So I stole the boys' bikes whenever the boys were playing someplace else. I learned to ride on a bicycle on a boy's bicycle. So finally I got my own.
When I went to Nelsonville, we roller skated every day. As long as we could get the sidewalk cleaned off, we roller skated.
We all had a great time. And even back then, you know, we used to play out in the street if your parents didn't see you.
You could sleigh ride on most any street in Athens, because even in the 1930s there weren't very many cars.
Did we have sleds?
I don't really think we all had a sled. Sometimes I think some of them went on a piece of tin, wasn't it, or something, which is so dangerous when you think about it. My kids did that, I'd be scared to death.
I don't know, ice skate. With them old screw-on ice skates, slip on your shoe and screw it on.
Ice skating that we did was one of the challenges that we always did was the ride from here to Millfield. We'd take Sunday Creek. We'd
skate up and down. Of course, you always get wet. I mean, you're always in the water.
We would go over and walk down the tracks all the way to the pool. And there we would go in and swim almost from the time it opened until dark.
Yeah, we did a lot of playing in the woods and in the hills. And I think my brothers probably played cowboys and Indians, but I remember my girlfriends and I just more hiking, singing. I remember once we took up smoking for a while, and then we decided, well, maybe we didn't want to do that, and we quit. But it was a good place to try that out.
I have been guilty of playing in the mud because it was red clay at our farm.
A lot of mud pies, and we decorate them with flowers from the garden, and they're dandelions or wildflowers.
Make little bowls or something like that, and then we would stick them in Mother's oven and fire them to harden them when she was baking. And she never liked it when she opened the door and saw something in there baking that wasn't what she put in.
We have a farm out in Union Furnace, the church does, and he would take us there on Friday night after the football game, and we'd all sleep together, all the girls and the guys. You know, we had bunk beds and we took sleeping bags. In the 50s, there wasn't anything wrong with that. The world has changed so much today that, you know, but they were wonderful times, and we'd get up early in the morning and we'd all fix breakfast together, and then we'd go out and we'd work on the farm. Like a family. Yes, we swam in the pond out there. We swung on, you know, big grapevines from one tree to another. Just, you know, fun-filled times. Fun, and I guess maybe I grew up with the philosophy that this is the day that the Lord has made, and so you used the day to the best of your ability.
They had a freight depot right there where LS is now, and they had a passenger depot on the other side of the street there. And every week they brought a car in there that had watermelons in it. And they put it on a siding there, and they would let us kids have all the melons that were broken. And we just ate watermelons all the time. And then they bring in a sand car there full of sand, and we get up there on the top of that car and jump in that sand and play in that. And we just had a ball.
The girls were more occupied with playing with dolls and playing house, and we'd get some of the wild things that were growing and maybe make a store, play store.
Tube rubber tubes or inner tubes and make rubber guns and various things like this. Cowboys and Indian games were very common with us.
We made up our games. We didn't have the toys and didn't have the money for the toys. It was during the Depression years, and it was really rough.
The one neighbor had a team of horses that he would go to town and gather trash from the people on the east end of town and bring it out and dump it in a ravine below his house. And we always kind of looked forward to that because us kids would all get together and go look and see what people threw away and maybe get a little broken dish that was real pretty and play house with that.
I remember our paper dolls was catalogs. We cut up catalogs. Whoever got the nicest catalogs got the nicest paper dolls. And we cut them out and put them in shoe boxes.
I had some dolls. In fact, I brought one of my dolls with me that we made doll clothes for when a girlfriend would come up. A doll like that. It had arms but didn't have legs or anything. The girlfriend, her mother sold material on cardboard, and then she'd order it, and then when those samples weren't any good, she'd give them to her daughter and I to make doll clothes out of.
When we made our own toys, we'd get a log and had a what they call a crosscut saw. We'd saw off pieces like that, and it'd be round, and we'd make wheels. we'd make a wagon. Of course, a wheel would break right away, you know. You'd have to do it all over again. And we made sleds. And we used mitre twine to make lines. My two younger brothers had goats, and we made lines to drive like horses. And they drove those goats around.
Let me get, was to make soapbox racers, but some of those were pretty simple, not much more than a sled with 4 wheels on it. And others could get quite elaborate with a motor place and the steering and all of that.
We built an airplane out of an orange crate and some tin cans and such and such, and windshield off of an old Model T Ford. So we took it to this boy's house, and because he had a roof that we could, you know, get it up on easily, and we could roll it off of that. So he says, well, since it's my roof, he says, I get to fly it first. Well, okay, so we tied ropes on the wings and held it back for him. He went running in the house and got his goggles on and his mother white scarf, and he says, contact, and we, okay, and let him go. So we let the ropes go. He rolled it out to the edge, and of course it was the best. Thank God he wasn't hurt. It was so funny, but that was something I remember.
And I know during his Depression time, I caught a skunk. You ever run across a skunk? Well, we used to trap them. And I caught a black skunk one night. And oh, you talk about, was I thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. That skunk, I looked at him, and he had a little spot of white right here, a little bit that much on the end of his tail, and I said, he's black. And that was the highest price you could get out of him. And that man, in fact, we had 2 fur buyers in Coolville. Whoever gave me the most, I sold it. $4 and something. Now, $4 and something would hardly wash your clothes today. Get that skunk out of them. And I bought a shirt and a pair of overalls, and I had enough money left. I bought what they called a radio steel runnered sled. About this long, steel runnered, and I still had some money left. I remember that was the king of the hill, that thing was.
What else you got to ask me? Pull out your list there.
Clothes. What did your clothes look like?
Oh, clothes. Oh.
Our stock clothing was Dungar overalls and gum boots.
I remember in grade school, of course, girls did not wear pants or slacks. Boys wore corduroy knickers and high-top boots.
Yeah, I remember them old knickers. They was made of corduroy. When I was about 9 years old, they blossomed out, and then made these legs come together, and every time you took a step, go. That old corduroy rubbing together, you know.
And girls wore knee socks and usually wool skirts and sweaters in the winter, and cotton dresses and skirts in the summertime.
And she would send me to school in these beautiful cotton dresses which she ironed, and you know, the bobby socks, and I would come home with a torn dress or a dirty dress because I'd been playing football or tag, and my mom would say, I'm going to send you to school in jeans just like your brother if you don't quit tearing your dresses. Of course she couldn't, because it was a violation of the policy, the school policy.
In high school, I think we went through a period of very short skirts and saddle shoes, loafers, very common.
Yeah, it was always white jeans. That was the big one. The white, you wore white Levi's and you were cool.
But I remember back when them high-top boots was in the style, man. They come up to about here, and they had a knife pocket on them. You're allowed to carry a pocket knife in. Every boy had to have a knife. Everybody did.
When you got up in the morning, you put your work clothes on, worked, ate your breakfast, and then you changed your clothes to go to school.
Usually we had 2 or 3 dresses, and Mother would keep them washed up.
keep them ironed. Everything had to be ironed in those days, everything.
Of course, those days when you went, Dad always wore a suit and tie and the whole bit. You know, when you went to Lazarus, you dressed up like you were going to a funeral.
My mom was meticulous about how we looked. We all three had little top knots on our heads with little bows, and you wore those until you were 10, 11, 12, and my mom thought we were indefinitely going to go around with a bread bow in our hair and a top knot.
Well, we didn't have a lot, not a lot of clothes. Mom used to buy feed and make me clothes out of feed sacks. And they were nice. She was a good seamstress.
And when Dad would go to the feed store to get that, she would try to have him to get, like, if he needed 3 or 4 bags, to get the sacks that were all alike, so she'd have enough to make at least a dress or whatever.
I guess everything must have been worn out, but signed up to get some welfare clothes for, I don't know if the girls got anything or not, but the boys did. Boys got nice new green pants, but there was a certain shade of green, man, that everybody knew they were welfare pants. Nobody wanted to be caught dead in them welfare breeches, but you had to wear them. You had to do it.
I was taught all my life, you are what you do. But the only thing I really want is to...
I was born and raised up in a little town they used to call Hunterton, which we referred to as 17 because it was a coal mining district. And the coal mines all had a number. So ours was 17. Then there was one in Hollister, and the mine was number 16. So a lot of people refer to Hollister as 16.
How much joy can one boy take? Does it make a sound when my heart...
My dad brought me to school on the back of a horse, and I walked home at night.
For the first 6 years, we walked.
You walked.
And we walked mostly down the railroad. There was where the highway is now that goes from here to Murray City. There was a railroad that went up there to go to the 17 mine. It went past the 16 mine and up to the 17 mine. But then if the train happened to come while we were on our way, and then at that time they were the steam engines and the steam would be rolling, we'd have to get over in the snowdrifts to get away from that. So after about 6 years of that, then they, for some reason, they decided that up where we lived then that we could ride. So that was nice.
We didn't close the school so many times as they do now with snow days. If the bus didn't run, you didn't go to school, but school was open. People who could make it would go, and that was it.
Oh, sometimes when we would get down there would be so wet because we went in the rain, the snow, or whatever. We would get there and they would stand us on the registers to dry out, and sometimes even down to the furnace room to get dried out before class time.
In first and second and third grade, I went to a one-room schoolhouse that had 8 grades in it and 1 teacher.
It was over on Franklin Street, the old Central School building. Lovely old building. 12 rooms and coal heat. Very nice.
The downstairs room had the first, second, and third grades, if I remember correctly. We had 1 teacher, and upstairs on the one side we had the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then across the hall was just the 7th and the 8th grade.
Going back to school, what was your favorite subject?
I liked them all. I loved school. I couldn't wait for the first day of school to start. And hated when the last day in that picnic was, and you knew you wouldn't see the kids then till September.
I majored in vocational agriculture because we lived on a farm. And then there were, English and math were required, and you always had a year of government required sometime in high school. Well, in VOAG, why you went through a series of how to plant potatoes and corn, and how to show at the fair, and how to judge. And one thing I remember about judging is we had this judging contest every year, and it was always held at Ohio State. Well, so all of the training for the judging was done with the ideal cow. With the pictures, you know. Well, I remember we went up to Ohio State to this judging contest, and it was the scrawniest, herd of cattle you ever saw in your life. And we had to judge those rascals. And to say the least, we didn't do very good.
When we got to Athens, and I enrolled in the 10th grade, well, our school was about 2 years behind Athens. So in just about every subject, they set me back in the 8th grade. There was only one thing I was good at and got A's in, and that was agriculture, because I worked for the area farmers down there.
And what did we do for recess? We ran to the outside toilet.
And that was fun in the wintertime too. Of course, everybody'd go because they wanted to get out of class.
We didn't really have the kind of freedom that kids have in school to speak up and ask questions or whisper to their classmate and ask them something.
They demanded discipline, expected it, and I think that your discipline started at home, because I got my share of paddlings, but I never went home and told my dad, because I probably got one at home.
I like school, but there was a girl behind me in the 2nd grade I'll never forget. She poked me in the back, and I turned around to see what she wanted, and the teacher saw me turn around, and she made me go and stand in front of the blackboard. And she told me she didn't want me crying either.
Sometimes when kids didn't mind, they had to stand in the corner. Sometimes they got paddled.
I was going to say, sometimes they went upstairs.
Yeah.
They wanted to know what the punishment was if you weren't good in school. And I told the children, I said, well, the most embarrassing thing that you could think of, this teacher would make you sit on her lap. And that would get you. That was embarrassing. You know, guys are all, laughing at you and this and that.
And I didn't get to graduate high school. We had, we were quarantined in with scarlet fever. And being so many in the family, we were quarantined from January through March when I was a sophomore in high school. And I didn't get to go to school because they wouldn't let anybody leave the house. And it was the Depression years, and so I went to work when I was 16 years old. More or less babysitting, housekeeping jobs, and so I didn't get to graduate from high school.
And I went there in 9th and 10th, and I went 1 week in 11th, and then I decided I'd join the Navy. I would have graduated in 44, but since I was a veteran, they passed a law here not too long ago that they would grant to veterans who were in World War II, that they would grant them a diploma, a high school graduation diploma. And so I have mine. Took me 58 years to get it, but I got it. It's hanging on the wall over home.
Oh, I did have a teacher once that wrote the Depression was in its very height. And she wrote a long, lengthy test on the blackboard. And I said, I beg your pardon, Mrs. Whatever, but you got that word spelled wrong. Oh, no, I don't. And she proved she was right. And furthermore, she said, I'll give $1 to anyone who finds a misspelled word on this board. And don't you know, lo and behold, I found one. And she let me know she'd pay me later. And, but you know, when I grew up, I don't know how old I was, maybe in the 30s or 40s, and looked back, I never forgot that for some reason. When I look back on that $1 she owed me, which she did pay 3 or 4 months later, that was probably a whole day's wages for her at that time. And when I got older, I was so ashamed of taking that $1. Even though I won it honestly. Well, that pretty well covered my school years, I guess.
When I was in the 2nd grade, which would be 1931, a teacher who had too many children in the class, but she scolded us one day and said, somebody's taking chalk out of the chalk tray, and it has to stop because we only have 3 pieces of chalk for this year, something like that. And it wasn't maybe a week or two later, she said, "Someone is stealing the chalk, and when I catch the thief, that child's going to be punished." So she got very stern and severe about it. We had a cloakroom where we hung our coats, and there was a shelf over all of the hooks, and that's where we put our paper sack with our lunch in it. And she would tell us who could go to the cloakroom and get their lunch at lunchtime. And she called two of us could go and get our lunch from. And as I noticed, as I was sort of walking behind him, as he went by the chalk tray, his hand reached out and got a piece of chalk off the chalk tray. I was so shocked. Alfred was stealing chalk. And we went in the cloakroom. I got my sack down over my coat where mine lived, and I watched him, and there was nothing over his coat. There was no sack, there was no little tin box or pail. There was no lunch over his coat. And then I saw him put the chalk in his mouth, and he was eating chalk for his lunch. And I had 2 biscuits with apple butter on them. That was my lunch every day, and I hated it. And I couldn't eat the 2, and my father had scolded me that I had to eat the lunch that was given me. When I went by his desk, I said, "Alfred, would you eat one of these biscuits for me?" And he was very embarrassed and didn't want to take it, but he was so hungry and so starved, he took the biscuit. And every day after that, I would go get my lunch, and I wouldn't say a word to him. I'd just take one of the biscuits and put it on his desk, and that's what he ate. And then I didn't get scolded for not eating my biscuit, and I wasn't lying. I had been throwing them away, and I didn't have to lie anymore to my father. So it solved my problem of what to do with that second biscuit. And for a little bit of a time, he had some lunch. Things were really tough for a lot of kids.
And so I decided for my 6 children